And now we'd like to welcome Jenny-Lynn Hall with her work, Diary.
Hi, I'm Jenny-Lynn Hall, and I'm here to talk about this show, Diary. It started when I was on a retreat in January, and I had the idea of recording, just making notes of the same place at the same time, more or less, every single day, and then doing a series from those notes. And this is the result of that. I didn't want to have painted notes. I wanted to try to remember the colors and interpret them later in my studio. So that's exactly what I did. I made notes. Here's my sketchbook. So I would make a note of the weather conditions. It was cloudy, and say the sea was dark gray, and here the next day sunny, and it was yellow ochre and a metallic and cobalt blue. And so I would make lines of where the different color divisions were, and then interpreted this from that. So a lot of time passed between when I made these notes and when I did these paintings. A lot of it had to do with just the fact that I was stuck at home with COVID and lost a lot of motivation to do art. But eventually, when I came back to it, it was sort of a different perspective. This piece really is about time and about how time always advances, and there are these subtle changes that are continually happening, and you have to really slow down to notice them. Most of the time our days are filled with schedules and things that we have to do, and it's just easy to get distracted from how life is really built off of these small moments. So this piece is really about that. So I guess we'll start with day 2. This is the one that I read the notes of. That's yellow ochre and a metallic cobalt. The technique I use is plaster, and it's a mixed media on top of that. So another thing I like about interpreting things that are more ephemeral, like water and sky, with a heavy material is just, it's really about the duality of everything in life. There are all these opposites happening at the same time. So it just seems like a contradiction. Well, because it is actually. But in the broader picture, I think it's cohesive. And these are done with a lot of loose ink-like pigment that is absorbed into these textures that I create, and then sometimes they're painted on. I wanted the horizon line to be pretty evident. I wanted that to be a continuum throughout the whole piece. And that to me is about, it represents the linear progression of time. And so I tried to highlight that quite a bit. I like to think of my work as being controlled chance. The plaster is opaque and the glazing is transparent, and so it's a continual play between those two aspects. The plaster, I'll set up a composition with plaster, and I can control how textural or not it is. And then how the ink is absorbed into the plaster is really, can be quite kind of casual. And so I'll have to go back a lot of times if I want it darker, if I want to exaggerate patterns that are starting to happen. And then if there's a composition, here there was a set composition, there was a horizon line, and there were these color relationships to set out. So I had to make sure that the lighting actually represented that scene. I didn't want to get too far away from it. So Shelley's on day 5 now on the video. And the show is called Diary 18 Days because that's as many notes as I took, but there are only 12 here in the show. Actually, there'll be a couple more outside. And I just found it fascinating how even on my trips down to this beach, and with the intention of looking at color relationships, so often I would look at the rock formations or look for a familiar dog that I saw, or the shape of the tides. And I find that often we just look for things that are familiar to anchor us. The color relationships actually started to become sort of secondary, and I really had to look for them. And there's something also I like about making notes of color. I used to go to Dillon Beach a lot, and I would just try to memorize the colors as opposed to taking a photo of them or painting them, because it seems to bring back that moment more clearly. Here, so much time passed that I really exaggerated them. I think it's also just because this has been such an emotional year for everyone that I really needed a sort of an outlet. On this other side, there's day 8, and the notes here are fiery clouds, and a storm had just passed that day. And then other days, this one here, day 11, which is completely white. It was foggy, and there wasn't really any definition between the sky and the ocean. And sometimes the ocean was really an intense blue, and sometimes it was lighter than the sky, just depending on the atmospheric conditions. I like this technique because it's largely experimental. I used to live in Italy and started to use this actually as a flooring material. And so I know that it's resistant, has all the characteristics of a floor. And I started in Europe actually to experiment with it as a decorative painting medium, how to put imagery into this and add texture to floors or walls or whatever. And here I just use it as a painting medium. So there's been a lot of research about support, what supports would work well with it, what different paints I can use. For a while I was actually painting with oil paint on top of it. And I think that that's really interesting to me, just thinking about materials, their compatibility, what effects you can get. A lot of times there's a constraint. So I gave myself a constraint of the horizon line and this subject. So working within a constraint, I find, just leads to more creativity, especially when the medium can also be at play. So that's this show. I hope you'll have a chance to come and see it in person, or I hope you enjoy this video.